Hello and welcome to the Client Success Customer Support Executive Brain Trust post-event panel discussion. After our hour-long Brain Trust event where we've gathered together customer support and client success executives to hit on a topic, we do a panel discussion with our lightning talk speaker. We are very fortunate to have Greg Warman with us today, talking about building in peak experiences and eliminating negative peak experiences. He gave a really great 12-minute lightning talk. And after that, we went into breakout rooms and had a further discussion about positive and negative peak experiences that we've identified in our own processes as CS executives. And that is where the conversation kind of went. So the purpose of this panel discussion is to gather together folks who participated in today's session to offer some insights that they have around what Greg presented on. Before we do that, I would like to turn the table over to Greg to kind of give us an update or just a quick overview of some of the key principles that he covered. So over to you, Greg.
Hey, thank you, Paul. So essentially, the world is a messy, complex place. Pace of change continues to increase. And as a consequence, when we think about our customer experiences and customer journeys, one of the best tools to really understanding our customers is user journey mapping. And that has multiple stages. There's the experience itself, there's the entry to that experience, the exit of that experience, and also the things that come before the entry and the aftermath of the experience. And if we were to map out all of that, there's some positives and some negatives for the customer. Here's the counterintuitive thing. Whereas we usually focus on how do we fix all the little negative things that are going on for our customer, what we have learned is that what is more beneficial is how do we amplify the peak moments of positivity and minimize those negative moments, the peak negative moments. And we get extra points if we do that towards the end of the customer journey, because that's what people remember the most.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg. And if you are out there and want to watch the recording of this, you can join our LinkedIn group and also join the CS Executive Brain Trust for further great topics like this. So thank you, Greg, so much. And we basically took his presentation. We went into breakout rooms to discuss positive and negative experiences. I've got this great panel here with us to kind of give us the synopsis of what they've learned, what their key takeaways were. So I'm going to turn the time over to Enrique and Kelly to kick us off, and anyone else that wants to jump in after that, please do that. So Enrique, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. So my comment is going to be Greg first. I totally agree with you on the approach. I do have some recency bias on it because we literally just full reactive team, a full proactive team to improve on the peak experiences. Now that does bring me with a couple of questions and a couple of thoughts that come from this. Mostly when it comes to a negative peak experience, that's a reactive approach. So we're actually getting to the customer after they've gotten the experience, right? Not before. But there does seem to be a lack of, I want to call it understanding of how to do it when we have peak positive experiences. How do we capitalize on those and communicate them with the rest of the customers so they can see somebody who had a really good experience with it, instead of just focusing on the recency bias of, hey, I had this bad one. How do I make this peak one, the one that I'm going to focus on? I make all the changes, but not everybody's going through the same issue. So where's the gap on that? That was one of the things that we discussed, for example, on my group that we found interesting, right? We might all be having the same issues. It's just a different way of approaching them, how we're seeing them. So yeah, that would be my comment / question to the team on the panel.
Great. Greg, do you want to respond to that at all in terms of, a negative experience happens, how to get on that quickly?
If I understood correctly, Enrique, like the majority of times that you have to get involved with a customer, it's going to be negative, right? Because they've encountered some sort of problem and that's why they're reaching out. So suddenly you're starting from a deficit to begin with. One of the parts of the conversation we had in our breakout group was about having some fun with thinking about how do you flip a negative experience into something that's positive. And we specifically discussed the idea of a user that encounters an issue with some software. And this is the kind of issue that the user has expectations that the software would have functioned as advertised, and suddenly it's not. And they're even going so far as to saying, don't you test this stuff? Isn't this the kind of thing that you and your organization would test and spot this kind of issue? And so one of the things that we talked about was, well, how could you make people feel good about discovering these types of issues? Is there a way where you could have somebody be part of a pioneering group, the same way the open source community sort of feels as they're looking at different pieces of software that are being developed? And when you discover something that others hadn't seen before, you are rewarded, whether that be just like simply socially or through some other benefits. So that's one different sort of creative approach to it. I will say more broadly, when you map out that user journey, what's fantastic is to be able to discover through conversations with your users, what are those thoughts, feelings, emotions, mental models, motivations that are really kind of at play as they're moving through the journey, and then determining based on maybe things you discover which were unexpected, what sort of opportunities there would then be for you to amplify positives and turn down the volume or the temperature on the negatives. I hope that helps.
Excellent.
It does. Thanks, Greg.
Kelly, over to you. What are some of your takeaways, thoughts?
And Greg, I really appreciate the presentation. I think, really spot on with the whole concept that I think as any customer support or customer success executive knows, you can't invest in everything. You can't make the entire experience great. There's just not enough resources to do it. And so it has to be very calculated on what you decide to invest in and creating that experience. And if you did try to invest in everything, then it'd just become this mediocre experience across the whole board, and you wouldn't have those peaks and valleys, which are really important. So I studied a really similar theory from Samson Lee that called it the pig theory, which was actually pain is good in the experience, where if you have a painful part of that experience, but then you remember that end and that really high point, then you take away from that, as long as that pain point wasn't too bad, but it caused you a little bit of pain, you remember that high point and you remember the end, and you can actually create a branded experience around agreeing that you're going to have a pain point. I don't know if I completely agree with that, because it seems so counterintuitive to create a great customer experience. However, I think it's an interesting theory to kind of throw it out there and get people's reactions and ideas. And just wondering if you kind of heard that along the same lines as what you presented today.
So I've lived it in that, and I wish Tanya was here right now because I love to boast about her. But her team of CSMs at Experience Point, we find that our NPS scores always go up after somebody has had the opportunity to interact with them when there's been an issue. So we can look at the NPS scores for people who just kind of sail through the use of our products, our workshops, and those are great, but they get even better after somebody has had an opportunity to deal with their team. And I can't even begin to describe the magic that she is able through her team to provide, but it's definitely there, and it results in our customers sending, our CSMs birthday cards and treats and all of these wonderful things. So that experience is something that has benefited our organization. If people end up tripping up with our stuff, we actually end up doing better. We don't try to create those moments of things falling apart, but it does happen. And yeah, it's good to know that people are entering into an experience there that they're going to walk away from loving.
Excellent. Yeah. Again, great presentation.
Kelly, you bring up a great, a really great point. Being a river guide, my tips would always be maximum tip money when the boat flipped. But you don't flip the boat. That's just going to happen sometimes. We're at the end nearly. Does anyone have any other parting thoughts that they'd like to add from their breakout rooms?
I can bring up one really fast. I think taking in voice of the customer is really important. So when a painful moment happens, being able to take that customer feedback and use that to improve a process or make things better, and communicating back to set expectations that you've heard them, that this is where you've tried to make changes in the process and you're going to do better next time, I think is a key. And with the feedback just given, I think around joining a community, like the idea of a customer advisory board and having different levels of that. So you can have executives in a customer advisory board, but you can have other levels of your customers that have channels of feedback and engagement and community as well to help drive change.
Awesome. That is a great way to end, Susan, on community. I want to thank you all for coming out to the panel discussion and to the Brain Trust. Again, last thanks to Greg and to Alan with Y Meadows for putting this all together. We'll see you all next month. Enjoy. Talk to you soon.